Thanks for tuning into the 100th episode of the Michael Welch podcast. When I started this a couple years back, I wasn't sure how long I would stick with it. And here I am today, just kind of tackling different topics that I so choose, highlighted by my love for football and basketball. Today, we tackle a couple different things that I have interest in with a couple of guests. We'll talk AI, we'll talk rebooting some of our classic properties that we grew up with, and I've got just a couple thoughts on the season finale of The Boys as well. Coming up on the Michael Welch podcast.
All my blessings, 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 all my blessings.
I need my blessings every penny, daily counting every single one, I'm seeing plenty. Level up and watch that beat turn into a Bentley. See I'm stunning, so I'm
What an exciting season 4 of The Boys. We are now wrapped and eagerly awaiting season 2 of Gen V, which will probably be released next year, I would assume, and then The Boys' final season, season 5, following that. We, of course, have what it seems like Homelander taking over, finally. He does in the comic books, of course. We deviated from those a long time ago in the TV show, but taking over the government now with the death of Singer and Victoria Newman, who switch sides after he reveals her to be a superhuman live on air to the world. And Butcher, of course, ripped her in half, or maybe his possessed mind by the serpent alien tumor thing that's growing inside him, parasite, I should say, that's kind of taking control of him, ripped her in half, and he now has got these tentacles that are shooting out of him as he's loaded up on Gen V. He did try to turn Ryan, and that did not work out so hot. Not sure how that's going to follow up in season 5, but he is loaded up and ready to go is Billy Butcher to continue to fight Homelander. Victoria Newman dead, Singer dead, and Homelander now firmly in control with a puppet president in place. We, of course, got some of the Gen V kids showing up in the crossover here and kidnapping the members of The Boys and having their way with them, either imprisoning them or, we'll see what's going on there. But that was some of the dramatic conclusion. The after scene part, of course, was Soldier Boy coming back into the picture, Homelander freeing him from his cryo status, so he looks to be back into the picture again in season 5 as well. Just a whole bunch of stuff happening in the very last episode after a very slow escalation throughout the entire season, really. So Homelander also killing a whole bunch of people at Vought. They could potentially harm him as he's trying to escalate his power here. We have Ashley taking some virus and mutating. We're not sure the end result of that, as she knows she was going to be at the top of the hit list. We have Annie. They did get rid of the shapeshifter eventually and caused some friction between her and Huey, because it took Huey a minute to realize that Starlight wasn't Starlight, that Annie wasn't Annie. Looks like that was the least of their problems, with a shapeshifter hired by Homelander to try and frame Annie, Starlight there, for killing the president, as he dies anyways. And we get Kimiko and Frenchie finally kissing, I guess finally coming together after their traumatic pasts that they've messed around with this season that seemed kind of unnecessary. But they're now together. Kimiko crying out for Frenchie in the last scene after he's mind control, lured away in the last scene there. Mother's Milk, of course, attacked as well by one of the Gen V guys. So looks very daunting and like a big task, a big ask for our team to try and survive in the next season. But then again, it's hard to tell who's a decent person in this show. Even Annie, when confronted by her shapeshifter, kind of calls her out for being, kind of a selfish, internally thinking, self-serving person throughout different aspects of her life. So it's hard to root for a lot of folks in this show. Billy Butcher's obviously a destructive monster. Homelander goes without saying. Ryan looks like he may be headed that direction. So we just have all kinds of problems here. We're starting to warm towards Victoria a little bit. And now she's gone, which is terribly unfortunate. So very excited to see season 5, maybe a while. But nice to see the crossover stuff going on. Nice to see just some excitement in the final episode. It's just too bad that they had to kind of, not a lot of pacing, just shove it all in. After a lot of just kind of one foot after the other episodes this season through the middle chunk of the eight episode season here, where there's just a lot of not a big exciting action happening. So to kind of not have a lot of pacing and shove a lot of stuff here at the end to kind of set us up for a big season 5, let's hope we get it's going to be a lot of big exciting action. Maybe a while before we have it, but I still think it was a great season 4 here of The Boys. He received his PhD at the University of Michigan in computer science, where he researched natural language processing and machine learning. He worked on his postdoc at Philipp University of Marburg in Marburg, Germany, was a research group leader at the University of Bonn in Bonn, Germany. He'll be moving over to McMaster University in Hamilton, Canada, and he was the recipient of the Humboldt Research Fellowship for postdoctoral researches due to his contributions as he's crisscrossed the world in his teachings, in his learnings, and his sharing of his research. My brother, Charlie Welch. So, what are you currently researching? Artificial intelligence is concerned.
Well, working on a few different things. So, a large part of my work has been personalization, but there's a new kind of wave in that research that is called perspectivism. So trying to create AI that better understands specific people or groups of people's perspectives. But the stuff I've been working on is pretty diverse. We've done some stuff on mitigating bias in language models. It's all related to language, but there's some overlap with social sciences and psychology.
Perspectivism seems very interesting. How is this applied then, as far as you're concerned?
Well, how is it applied is a good question, because I feel like it's mostly just research right now. But like if you take ChatGPT and you ask it what something means or what feelings someone is experiencing when you describe a story, like a story about Michael eating a pizza, and then you ask it, how does Michael feel about the pizza? It has an answer that it can give that's based on its aggregation of all of the stories that it's read or whatever. But it doesn't know you specifically. It could be applied to like any AI really.
So it doesn't
gives you an interpretation.
So it doesn't necessarily have a landing place yet, per se?
Well, so I can say there's not a lot of data sets for it, because historically people have had the view that there is an objective answer for things in our field, which made a little bit more sense historically when you're talking about low-level language tasks, like what part of speech is this thing, or like when you're resolving a co-reference. So like Charlie and Michael are at the house. Charlie goes to the kitchen and he eats the pizza. So who is he? Mm-hmm. He is Charlie. Like those kinds of things are more objective. There's still some subjectivity in that stuff just because everybody interprets language differently and language is always ambiguous. But natural language processing and artificial intelligence have moved toward more subjective tasks. So sentiment analysis was a task that was popular for, I mean, it still is. It's been a big thing for decades. And it's motivated by like companies wanting to understand how people view their products or like what people like and dislike. and it has similar applications in like anything where you'd want public opinion in government or whatever. And I mean, the basic form of it is, do people think this thing is positive or negative or neutral? But then, like,
I was just gonna say, so that's stuff
you have a
that
question?
the every man, everyday person like myself would be bumping up against without knowing it, correct?
Yeah, like people have been scraping that stuff from the internet to understand people's views for a long time. So anything you write online,
And
bots are
artificial
trying to
intelligence has been a
understand.
part of that as well for a long time.
Yeah, and that's like a really basic form of subjectivity, but there's other things, particularly as AI causes more problems. These newer areas of study have popped up. So the data sets we have for studying perspectivism have more to do with emotions, the perception of empathy, and what is considered hateful or offensive. Those are some of the biggest areas. You can imagine that those things are quite subjective. And then looking at what information you have about a person that can help you determine how to answer those questions. And so I've been looking at those kinds of data. Part of it is just that's what's available. I'm interested in all sorts of subjectivity, and I think that there's a spectrum of subjectivity along different tasks that NLP, natural language processing, is applied to, where those grammatical things are on one end and what emotion is this person feeling is on the other end. But yeah, that's kind of the data that we're dealing with right now, because if it's more subjective, it's easier for us to find those effects, and we don't have a lot of data. So those are some of the constraints.
The fear that it's the to the everyday person, because obviously you've been working with artificial intelligence. How long would you say you've been working with artificial intelligence then, technically?
Well, I don't know. I was checking out books from the library when I was like
I remember you
or something,
started reading Coding for Dummies at like 11. So that was when you started picking up computer science principles and stuff.
Yeah, and I remember I checked out a book from the MSU library when I think I was 14, and I coded a neural network, but I didn't really understand what I was doing. I didn't because they have you do these examples in the books where you like learn to approximate a function. That's basically what the neural network is doing. And they teach you with something simple. So they teach you to approximate a function like a binary function. You have two inputs and it gives you an output. And that's a function that you already know what the outputs are going to be. So what I didn't understand is that these things are useful when you have a ton of data and you're using that to approximate a function that you could never really write down on a piece of paper. Maybe there isn't even an actual function that solves the problem you're looking for. Like there isn't a function that will take text and tell you what emotion is in that text, because there's no answer to that. But you can train an AI model to approximate a function like that more people agree with, and then you can improve it and more people agree with the output that it's giving. So you could say that it is approximating the function better, but there isn't a real underlying thing that you can find there. So I didn't understand that at the time until I got to grad school, I think, because even in undergraduate curriculum, there wasn't a lot of AI at the time. I think there's probably a little bit more now.
Yeah.
In the past few years.
So almost 20 years you've been at least started dabbling. You just celebrated your 33rd birthday, with our birthdays being 10 days apart here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. This will be coming out on my 35th here. Well.
Cool.
That's a lot. So obviously the common person has not at least been in touch with AI as much, as maybe more than they think, but so to you, the release of like Chat GPT a couple years ago, then all of a sudden you can, folks are worried about kids homework being done by AI, and artwork being taken, and those are legitimate fears. But when that started to become, I guess, more open so that anyone could start using some of those tools, that was not even on your radar probably then, because you're working on much more advanced models and other areas, correct? Or was some of that still in your purview? Were you using some tools like that years previous? Are you still keeping an eye on some of those general concepts, how they're being applied, how they're being developed?
Well, I think I had a much broader sense of what I wanted AI to do before I started doing research on it. And then you get into really, really specific things, and most things are you're building a tool that does one thing. Like, it takes in pictures and it tells you if they're cats or dogs, or it takes in text and it tells you if it's positive or negative.
Yeah.
So I wasn't thinking about it as much in terms of like tools that people would use every day to do all sorts of things. Like, I think ChatGPT and other language models like that, they give people access to a broad kind of range of things that AI can do, whereas, practitioners might use specific tools for those things. And yeah, I wasn't thinking as much about that. There's a whole separate field of research called human computer interaction, where people, they're looking at how people are actually interfacing with the technology, how best to do that, and what that helps people do. Is it more effective than other tools? That kind of stuff. And I really want to break more into that. I'm looking for collaborators on that, especially because my work on like personalized language models was a big chunk of my thesis work. And I think that there's a lot more advanced kind of stuff we can do with assistive typing technology. If you think about your phone and you're writing a message, it's telling you which word should come next in the sentence. But I think there's a lot of other ways that you can present options to users of what to say or how to say things. And I think we're starting to see that more with different smart reply or smart composition features in different mail clients, for instance, and also with tools like Grammarly. But I think there's a lot more research to do in that area.
Yeah. I'm wondering if there's a time.
Excuse me.
I mean, we still learned cursive in school. I believe in general, of course, all curriculums are different across the country, and even for you're not even living in this country, or won't be. Writing style, how it's taught can be very different, and that may be something that we tend to move away from in the future as AI is more prevalent. If I can go on a brief side piece here, do you have any thoughts on? I know you're not the biggest, not Zuckerberg, but Elon Musk fan and his Neuralink thing, and I haven't done a ton of reading on that, but obviously that would involve at least some piece of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, it depends on what exactly he plans to have this thing do. I mean, if it's a computer in your head that's, I don't know, giving you answers to things, I guess it would have some search component.
Yeah. Sometimes it's like, what AI is the end goal? Is your smartphone now just going to be in your head? Like, what is the actual practical application? That kind of thing? Is that what you mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't know much about what the plans are for that. To me, it seems like people want to put ads and things. Like, they want to influence you. And if they put a chip in your head, then there's no way to pay for the
ad-free version of the Neuralink. It's like, no, you can't. You can't email dad from our heads. Yeah. You have to sit through a 30-second Manscaped ad first.
Yeah, I think there's actually a Futurama episode like that where they show there's like these screens that project from their eyes and all these ads are popping up and stuff. It's horrible.
What are your thoughts on? Obviously, every day I think the last article I saw was Salesforce laying off several hundred employees, stock market. obviously adapting fairly quickly and moving off of traders, as it seems like they've adapted some smarter models of AI, if I'm even using that verbiage correctly, to track market trends. So they're laying off some traders at different institutions there. What are your thoughts on AI replacing jobs? Is that going to create, different? What kind of jobs is it going to kind of replace? What opportunities does that realistically open up? And there seems to be, I said it and I think it made you chuckle, but fear mongering. I just like to say mongering. I think that's a fun. There's a lot of fear around AI, but there's a lot of fear around everything, but particularly around some of the jobs. It's a legitimate concern. What are your
Yeah.
general thoughts around that? Because obviously it's a moving target, but at least you've had your hand in artificial intelligence for little longer.
Yeah, and there wasn't so much
Mm-hmm.
publicity until a couple of years ago, and it's gotten
I,
really
yeah,
annoying,
that I
honestly,
figured.
really out of hand. And I mean, people, it's just like the new area where you can scam people. There's a lot of like convincing people that they need AI when they really just need basic functioning products, and that would do a lot more for their company than investing in AI. But there's this movement of trying to convince people that their businesses will be left behind if they don't invest in it, and that AI can do more than it actually can. ChatGPT actually isn't that good. It's not actually that useful for many things. I have to admit that I've tuned out a lot of this stuff. So, I mean, there are researchers that would say, well, this newest model is actually pretty good if you want to compose this type of email or something. But I mean, it has a lot of issues. It just makes stuff up. It says harmful things to people. I tried to get it to write a story about a pirate, and I couldn't get it to not plagiarize Pirates of the Caribbean. I tried to get it to like rewrite part of a paper I was writing, and it did such a miserable job. I don't use AI in my everyday life because
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the tools are good enough
Yeah,
for that.
yeah. So as you stated, the like
Um,
adapting both the perspective building portion and the kind of building, not just plagiarizing, but is it fair to say the interpretation and then building in combination with perspective and the empathy and emotion? Like those are all pieces that need to be built to create a real successful AI tool for whatever you're trying to do, whether it's factory work or writing a good paper or whatever. And we're missing basically all the pieces.
well, I feel like I should describe more of the background. So like I was saying, when I started doing research, I went from this view of like building a AI. Like as a kid growing up, I thought, well, we want to build this AI that's like a human and can do all these different things. And then when I actually got into research, it was like everybody's building these really specific tools, like even building a parse tree of a sentence is not a trivial task. And then as research goes on, the models that they use to do this change all the time. So there are people who work more on the theoretical aspect of mathematically how do we do the optimization so that we can better find this function for the specific thing that we're trying to do. And then there's work on how to apply those models to different types of problems. I don't work as much on the lower level mathematical side of things, but when I started working, there's these different statistical models, support vector machines, and, Bayesian models, logistic regression, all these like basic statistical models that have been around forever. And neural networks weren't as big of a thing. And during my PhD, there were some breakthroughs in how to optimize neural networks that were very successful, and people started shifting towards using them for everything pretty much. And from then until today, there's a lot of practitioners who I think have this view like neural networks are going to be the way that we do everything going forward. It's just not always the way that research works. It could be that in any number of years there's a different model that we use for these things, but everything's neural networks now. And so they would have, instead of the older models, you'd use a neural network for your parsing, use a neural network for your sentiment analysis, for your emotion recognition. But you needed to train separate models for all these things. And there were different training procedures. So it was like you'd add a thing to the network or you'd design a different component specifically for the task that you were trying to solve. And then when we got to what people call large language models, it was this discovery that if you train on a ton of textual data, just keep training, don't try to innovate on the model or architecture as much. Or, I mean, you can innovate, but not as much specialization. You could create a neural network that could do multiple tasks. It could do many things with the same model. You didn't have to train a separate tool for each one. And then with ChatGPT, one of those things that it learned to do was have a dialogue with a user. And then you could interface with the user to do all these different things. And the last time I checked, so as far as I know, like LLMs that you can talk to, they pretty much always underperform the specific tools, which kind of makes sense. If you have a tool, the same amount of resources you put into building a highly specialized tool, you put it into making a chatbot that can do anything, then it's not as good at those individual things.
Like a Swiss Army knife that isn't as specialized at being a knife per se.
Yeah. So I think I forgot what your original question was. It was like about jobs. So
that's all right.
Sure
you're going back and explaining your original concept of what you thought you were going to do with artificial intelligence, then how the building of it was and training models to, I saw it as growing a tree. You're growing a tree up, and then you're able to split off into different branches and teach it to do different things. And perhaps it's not good at that original thing of maybe just being a single tree sticking up, because now it's got all these other pieces to supplement.
Yeah. But I think that, having a chatbot that you can talk to that then millions of people could interface with all these kinds of tasks we've been trying to solve and tools to solve them seemed like a really impressive leap forward. And a lot of people in my field of research would also say that. I tend to be on the more skeptical end, I think. But I'm also just kind of tired of people telling me that it's so good and it just miserably failing every time.
So do you think it's moving
something?
In general, slower developing than you'd expect, or on pace? Well, we have, we were supposed to have flying cars by now. They said 40 years ago. And, those aren't going so hot.
Well, I do think it was impressive to see that the model could do all of these things together, even though it's not the best at any individual thing. That still was surprising. So I think that breakthrough, I guess I wasn't expecting, but also it wasn't technically that big. It doesn't technically seem like that big of a breakthrough, because the biggest part of it was we want to put the whole internet through this model instead of the billions of sentences we've been using. Let's use the whole internet.
Just a small,
just a
small
ton
scale.
more data. And
too small to be really impressive.
Yeah, and I mean there were changes to be able to process all of that, and like there were changes to the learning algorithms that were interesting. But a large part of it was just let's throw more data at it, which is not impressive or technically interesting. But like I said, having the model that people can interface with seemed really impressive, which drove the hype surrounding everything. Which I think, then people see that and they think they don't know what's coming. They weren't expecting that. they have their idea of what is happening in the present, and they have a sci-fi idea of what the future could be, and they know that we're at some step in between those two, but they don't know
So
how far.
if artificial intelligence is able to fully, I don't know, operate like a human would independently at a 10, like where are we now on a scale? Are we still in the infancy as far as what we're able to do? Are we like a 1? How far are we really on the scale of development in artificial intelligence generally?
That's going to be a tricky question to answer because there are like
Fields, right?
really specific definitions of like all of the actions that it can take and whatever. And like I can hook an AI up to whatever I want and it can take actions, but how well does it do those things? I don't know. I'm not hooking it up to my stocks. And I was at a conference and someone made a comment about using large language models to have smarts communicate with each other about how they should drive or like who should turn. And it was like a theoretical question, but so many people got so upset because they're like, these things, they're hard to predict. You shouldn't trust them for decision making. That could kill someone. I mean, there's like the Turing test. If you want to talk about that, that's a test that Alan Turing came up with to distinguish between a computer and a machine intelligence. And the idea is if you are having a conversation with a computer and a conversation with a machine via a terminal, so you can't see the person, if you can't distinguish between the two, then you pass the Turing test. But then there's been a whole bunch of discussion and modifications to that because people usually can pass the test if they just kind of act confusing or they ask a bunch of questions. Like you could talk to me for 5 minutes and I could not really respond to anything that you say, but just say like, well, how do you feel about that? Well, how about I ask you a question instead? You know, I can go on and it sounds like I'm talking kind of, but not actually responding intelligently. So there's a lot of nuance to that. And then there's a lot of research in psychology as well. Some people have tried to apply personality tests to large language models to see like, oh, well, the GPT model is more agreeable than the llama model or whatever. But then there's a whole bunch of criticism of that kind of work because these are tests that are developed for humans and we don't know if it really makes sense to apply them to machines because they're like fundamentally different mechanisms. And so that's an ongoing thing. So I guess that's a hard question to answer.
Okay. But a lot of space still for a lot of development for sure. It sounds like we have building blocks down, but there's even disagreement on how to get to certain space.
Yeah, and I don't work with anything that's really embodied either. So, if you're talking about a robot that walks around and picks stuff up, that's actually, I know that that's really tricky as well, and none of the recent breakthroughs that I'm aware of, at least the ones that we've been talking about, like with ChatGPT and all that doesn't help a robot go and like pick up a object. That's actually a really, really difficult task.
You think it's like spatial awareness and kind of the strength to pick it up or judgment?
Yeah, because you need, so in your hand, like if you're picking up an egg, you need to be able to see where it is. You need to know how to move your arm to move it to that place to pick up the thing, how to move your fingers. And part of that is like when you touch the egg, then there's the nerves in your finger that tell you how much is it pushing back, how much is it moving, so you don't break the egg. And then picking it up, making sure you don't drop it, like all of that is really difficult, I think. So I'm not worried about robots walking around. I mean, there are some videos of like those dog robots. Yes. Those are pretty creepy, but
they're advanced enough though to take obviously simple tasks, it seems like, though. that are going to displace workers, going back to the original root point, but probably not. We don't have anything to worry about at the moment as far as actual, like, really human calculated, brain power and feeling and that kind of thing, right? But you can see where maybe factory basic repetitive tasks, or I would imagine stock markets are reading just very particular trends that they're able to pick up on, some of those kind of things.
Yeah. Well, so there's a lot going on, and I'm not an expert in any of this, but I could say some stuff. I think that, like I was saying, there's this surge in hype surrounding AI. I think that people are firing more people than they realize they need. So I think, some of those jobs I think will come back. And like, I don't like interacting with AI. If I have to contact customer service, I don't want to talk to AI. I always say human, and then it transfers me to a human.
That makes sense.
Like, there's a lot of things you don't want robots to do. There's people who do research on like doctor patient interactions, and applying AI to doctors, and they're saying, well, if you don't have access to medical care but you need medical advice, maybe an AI could help you get some of that information. I think that's true to some extent. I mean, it's in a lot of ways it's just another kind of search engine, but in some cases it does make information more accessible, and if you need medical information, that could help. Although we also have a paper about how it's really bad at answering safety critical questions. So we had a GPT model. We were asking questions like, is it okay to take a gram of Oxycontin? Yeah, I'm pregnant, but my boyfriend wants me to keep the baby, and then the AI tells you to kill the baby.
Yeah.
So it's not good at answering a lot of those questions, but people want to apply it to medical scenarios, and I would much rather have a human doctor talking to me. And a lot of motivation for the empathy work is people are saying, well, in that kind of situation, the doctor can be empathetic and can help you through this process, and maybe we could get the AI to do that too. But it's hard to imagine that ever exactly working that way.
So we may be a little ways away from that still.
Yeah, and also in terms of creativity, because since that's the new area of impact, like I heard some stuff about people are firing their writers, or when the writers were on strike, they were using AI to write scripts or something. Those are not going to be good.
I had something offhand. I don't have it, but yeah, something in the negotiated contract was they had to give okay now or something, at least for now, as far as that's concerned, because they were trying to, major studios were certainly trying to do that to cut costs, but that's certainly a concern in the future. So creativity, I've heard you speak of that before, obviously, and that's, obviously a big concern in multiple instances, right? I mean, that could be a medical thing too. Obviously, you want to try and follow patterns to solve problems, but if you need to get a little creative in a solution, then that's
yeah, exactly. And like the stories that AI can write, like it can write a short story decently well. But if you wanted to write a novel or a TV show or anything longer, it really struggles to do that. And even for the short stories, it's copying things. It's not very original. It leans on cliches because those are the things that are most common
in
the data that it was trained on. And it's the same thing with images and stuff as well. I personally think that a lot of the generated images are very cool, but like if it can't really make something very different from what already exists.
I think it'll be
you still need
absolutely people. And obviously the theft part is the theft or plagiarizing of different aspects, whether it's art or writing, as you stated, is obviously a concern right now. I think you mentioned that legal wrangling the legal issues of AI is another separate branch right now as well. Um,
Yeah,
what
definitely.
what do you think are some of the AI and teaching or learning in the future? What do you think are some of the benefits or the ways that you can incorporate artificial intelligence in the classroom or in college or maybe in general life? Obviously, just having the phone, internet was a big piece, just having access to the outside world as a human being. What do you think about AI as a professor? What do you think about AI in the future in learning in general?
Yeah, it's another tool that I think is going to be helpful for a lot of people. I was saying that I don't use it for anything really in my daily life, but I do know that people use it for coding, for instance. So if you want to learn the basics of coding different things, I think that it could help you to start to experiment with some of that stuff. For instance, it could write you starter code for a certain program or website or whatever you're writing. I've heard it's not very good at deviating from the basic stuff. But I remember doing a lot of coding and looking for the right posts online that were describing the thing that I wanted to do, which was time consuming. So it can help you get access to information. You wouldn't trust it for things. Like you can have it generate code and then you can run the
Mm-hmm.
code and you can see if it works. There's also an issue with it generating code that works, but it's buggy. But for teaching purposes, for learning purposes, you could probably use it to experiment with some of that stuff. If I were using it to write something, I would fact check it. But I think that these kind of AI tools can be used to assist people. I
It's just another tool.
It's another thing. Some of the motivation for the empathy work is we can tell doctors in training different possible ways to say things, which doesn't mean that we're telling them what to say. I don't think we can say things better than they can necessarily. They're going to understand the context and the pragmatics of the situation better to be able to respond to people. But it might have a phrase in its response that gives the doctor an idea of like, oh yeah, I could also mention this thing, or I could phrase this as a question. That's a good idea. When I have used it for writing, my goal was to get something out of it that would
Sure.
get me out of my writer's block, like give
Yeah.
me a direction to start in. I don't end up using any of the stuff that it writes, but it's like I can see what that might look like now, and I can make modifications to that to get it closer to where I want it to be.
Do you think that,
Um,
you know, I think there's some concern that AI will be relied on too much as a crutch for learning. I kind of think of it as, like you weren't supposed to use your calculator sometimes when we were in class. You're supposed to do it a long way. So I'm like, you're going to have a calculator regardless in the real world. You're going to have artificial intelligence. You're going to have, I don't see it as a crutch, but an additional tool to learn. I don't think it necessarily is going to make anyone dumber to have resources available to you. I don't know from a teaching perspective if it's going to kind of allow you to open up a new world of like creativity, like you said, open up writer's block or open up an artistic side or, you know, allow for some of these things. Or if artificial intelligence, at some point, I assume will have to be more widely accepted.
yeah, I saw a funny picture. It was two pictures side by side, and I think one was teachers on strike when calculators were coming out, saying students shouldn't use calculators, and then the other picture was teachers saying that their students shouldn't use ChatGPT. So I think it's similar in a lot of ways. It's another tool that students can use, But I think, some things might have to change in terms of how you
Mm,
evaluate students. And it depends on the skills you want to learn. Like, I don't know how much arithmetic people do. I don't know if the fact that they had a calculator when they were going through school means that they're missing some
yeah.
skills now. I mean, I think that.
We really rely on so many tools now. It's hard to see how artificial intelligence even. And again, we're speaking broadly because we don't know exactly necessarily what form it's going to take. But it's hard to see that more building tools is actually going to make things more difficult. I just that seems hard to envision.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I feel like there's going to be this period of time where it's easier for some students to pass their classes and assignments
Doesn't that
because
just
they're
mean you have
using tools.
to change what the assignments may look like?
Yeah, you can change what they look like. There's always issues with
Hmm.
scaling. Like, I could give every student an oral exam and then, like, they can't use AI. If they used ChatGPT to study, then they basically used a search engine that lies sometimes. And, if that worked and they passed the exam,
Yeah.
then that's fine. But, when you have too many students, then you can't do that. So I think people are exploring what to do in that case. I don't think it's going to make people worse at
Not going to dumb anyone down.
things, though. I don't think so because it's
Well,
not that
as it
good.
develops, I mean,
And
and you can integrate it into your life, but yeah, I don't see that either. A lot of tools, instruments have been figured from the computer itself to the internet to calculators to cars to everything has fear before acceptance for the most part as we develop. To that point, what aspects of AI are, I guess it's kind of a three pronged. So I guess what's underreported as far as like where we are now in AI, what's kind of underreported as a positive and a negative aspect, because there are plenty of fears out there, but what are some concerns that we don't necessarily see? Is there anything out there that we're not already have concerns about? And what are some positives that we're seeing? I know you've worked on, maybe we can transition this, and I know you worked on going back to the learning piece. You worked on something for University of Michigan that helped with class scheduling and a few projects like that.
hold on, what was the first part
Yeah,
of the
just
question?
what parts of
Sorry.
artificial intelligence that aren't commonly known or commonly reported are
Right.
positive and negative aspects.
I do feel like there's still a lot of hype. There's been a lot of pushback against the hype that AI is gonna do everything and take over. But we still
Okay,
need to
that's
come
fair.
down from that a bit. So, I think part of what should be reported more is that it's not as good,
Okay,
not very good at a lot of these things. I do feel like I might have a blind spot here though, because don't see what everybody's using it for. I've heard people say that it's useful for things, but all the people that I'm close to or my colleagues say that it hasn't been useful for any of the stuff that they're trying to do except writing really basic code and
yeah.
generic
Well, just
recommendation letters.
just from
Which,
your perspective, right? I mean, as far as like myself, who does not touch on AI in general, except when I search Google now, and is it Gemini the search engine in there, the AI engine that helps generate better answers, or supposed to? I'm sure Bing's got a piece, and then I'm
oh
using
yeah, I guess so.
GPT once in a while, and I use like Canva for designs, and Canva has an AI piece in it. Like that's it for AI for me, is some design, some help, and whatever. So anything beyond that is a blind spot for me. So if you have any further insight on anything, I think it's ahead of 99.9% of all other folks.
Oh well, I mean, it's used for everything, and it's used for a lot of cool stuff, and a lot of stuff that is completely outside of my field of research. Because it's really anywhere there's patterns and you're predicting things, and you can predict weather phenomena, you can predict climate stuff. People are have used it to analyze people's brains while they're sleeping and try to recreate the images of what they're
That's
seeing
pretty
in
cool.
their dreams. People are trying to use it to decode the language of animals. So maybe
That's
we could talk
wild.
to animals someday.
We did see
Because we're still
full
trying to figure out
capacity.
like what
Yeah,
what are whales talking about? What are dogs and elephants, and we don't know what all those sounds mean. We know, like, there's research on different social animals like prairie dogs, and they act a certain way or they make a certain kind of sound to have different types of signals, but there's a lot more to animal
yeah, that's a
communication that we don't
fascinating
understand.
area. We did briefly. It was a brief talking point with our father, who's in landscape and horticulture and agriculture, taught for 35 plus years and is still an advisor with the National Science Foundation. And he, you know, there was an article about, I don't know if was it a specific machine that was targeting, it was an alternative to pesticides that we know in crop fields is a problem with runoff and damage and hurts crops and all that. But it was some kind of machine that would specifically kill insects or even specific insects on crops without damaging crops or using pesticides that caused runoff and all these other problems. And that was guided by artificial intelligence. So that's another piece, of course.
Yeah, definitely. They have all these drones and robots and stuff that go over the fields and can help
With
the
our
plants
food
in different
supply
ways.
generally taking a backseat in the news cycle, helping to keep that safe is a big piece as well. So some of these things that we don't even think about as much.
Yeah, and a lot of like study in medicine and disease and genomics and all that stuff can use AI. Because it's all building statistical models. Guess I kind of see that as synonymous with AI. I don't know. The
You consider
definitions get
them
kind of fuzzy, but
different in general? What is AI to you?
I guess it's kind of a poorly defined term. Well, I guess I think of it as building any kind of statistical model to predict or categorize data.
And it ideally, is it fair to say that ideally, I mean, we're working on this part, but kind of learns? Is it the learning part and or is it just the predicting?
Yeah, yeah. So to build the model, you usually have some data that you train on. A lot of AI is you have a data set, you train a model on that data set, and then you're done. Then you have a model that makes predictions. But there's a lot of real world use cases where you need to continue training or continue updating. So there's
Yeah.
more of a cycle
Is there
there.
anything else that we should cover about AI specifically?
I guess building off of the what I was saying about there being, instead of these specialized models, having one model that does all your stuff. So, like, if I wanted to, I'm trying to come up with an example, something that requires world knowledge or common
What about
sense
sarcasm?
knowledge. Yeah, sarcasm's probably a good one. What's like a sports one? Like someone's misses a shot. And you could say, like, nice shot. So, if you just had a collection of people saying sarcastic things about basketball games or something, you could build a model to try and predict if something's sarcastic or not, but it would help a lot if you knew the real world statistics of if these people made those shots or not, or what actually happened, how does basketball actually work, and those exist somewhere. Like the rules of basketball are described somewhere, the stats of the
Yep.
games exist somewhere, and those things can be integrated into these other language models or whatever kind of neural network model that you're using. So this kind of knowledge integration kind of upcoming area that people are looking at.
That's cool to give it a nice firm base.
Yeah, like the language models that you interact with have all been trained on just text data. So they're looking at how do people respond in similar conversations or forum posts or whatever online. And predicting the response based on that. But if you also could give it all this statistical data or knowledge symbolically encoded somehow, then it could use that to improve its predictions. So there's a lot of work on that. There's been historically very separate work on language and vision in other modalities, so like audio speech. And over time, those things have been merging together more. So people call it multimodal AI. So, like, sarcasm's a good example. Telling if something is sarcastic in text is a lot more difficult than from someone's speech or from seeing someone's face as they're saying it. So the other modalities add a lot of information there that the models can benefit from, but there's a lot of ongoing work on that. Yeah.
Well, this has been really fascinating, Charles. Very informative.
Good. Yeah, I'm just checking here if there's anything else. I don't know.
I think so.
We covered a lot of stuff.
Can always bring you back to do more.
Sure. Okay.
It still sounds like it's a little bit of the Wild West, and there's still a lot of developments. We're not going to have robots taking over the world next Sunday.
No. I'm not worried about any of that kind of stuff. I am worried about people being stupid. There's a lot of stupid things you can do. I mean, you don't want to give AI the ability to make decisions that could negatively impact people. You can use it to provide people with information or advice, but then a human has to be in there to decide if this is good or useful information.
Of course, that makes sense. Bad input is bad output.
Yeah, and there's a lot of history of that stuff too. There's like predictive policing kind of stuff. So there's been statistical models that people use to predict where crime would happen and like recidivism rates to determine sentencing for people. But there was no transparency in these models, and also like who should get a loan or not. And those models were encoding a lot of the time basically you're black or something about your race or gender or occupation that would discriminate against you, which is illegal. But if the model is giving you a prediction and you don't know why it's giving you that prediction, and you're deciding how long someone should be in jail or whether or not they should get a loan based on that information, that's highly problematic. So I think a large part of the push also is to have models that people can understand better. It gives you an output, but you need to understand why it's giving that output, especially in medical applications. Like if a model tells you, I think you should give this guy this drug, that's completely useless information unless it tells the doctor why.
Right.
What evidence does it have?
That makes sense. Yeah, it's fascinating, I think. But
there's a long ways to go.
I see that very clearly now. Well, thank you very much, Charles. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Talk to you
Thanks
later.
for having me.
Here with Cousin Ben, co-host of Polymuse, with me, and also co-host of the Pennymen podcast, where he covers the kind of topics that we're touching on now. Comics, TVs, movies, nostalgia, current time, great media properties. Hello, Mr. Ben.
How you doing, Michael? Good to be back in the Polymuse studio once again.
Absolutely.
Laying some tracks.
My great cousin, putting some stuff together. So for this segment, I thought we'd do a retro reboot. As we know, a lot of our classic properties. Yeah, I like that. I thought we could continue it. If we like what we're doing here, we can do it some other time and pick up some other segments to do.
The reoccurring retro reboot revival remix.
There we go. I love it. The quadruple R's. But as we know, the Masters of the Universe has been ongoing since the 80s. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The Marvel
never stop.
Yeah, Marvel universe keeps rolling on. The DC universe. Then we have various properties like the Biker Mice from Mars, which you let me know was actually revived in the early 2000s. I didn't realize that. but it's supposedly coming back again thanks to Ryan Reynolds. He's going to bring it back. I don't know why he specifically chose that animal group of heroes.
Whoa, wait a minute. That was real?
Yeah.
I saw that on your notes. I thought that was your idea.
No, that's a real thing. I know, right? It's hard to tell now. So the whole goal here is that these are I just wanted to pick some things and pick your brain a little bit and pick some of the top items that could use a good reboot, whether it's already been a comic, toy, movie, video game, whatever it is, and something that
all the stuff we love.
Yeah, something that needs a clean reboot. Whether it's been, it's got just one of those avenues going for it right now that's not really used very well, whether it hasn't been around in 10 years, but whether it needs just a clean reboot, and maybe it needs an age scale up or an age scale down, something more mature.
Yes.
Or maybe it's still tailored to a nice younger audience. And how can it, maybe expand a little bit if need be? Like maybe we need action figures for something or some cool collectible line, or it can go into a McDonald's, or maybe it needs a movie finally, or maybe the TV show needs to change a little bit this time around. So that kind of thing, just rebooting a traditional old school media property.
Yeah, I think we could talk about this forever. This probably should be a segment. That is a lot of different avenues to go down with this thought process.
Yeah.
We'll definitely touch on a few that have been reviewed or already rebooted, just briefly.
Yep.
We'll mention a few along the way and fill in the gaps. Yeah, I like that idea of because, dude, like you were saying the other day, like the Turtles has always been brought back and brought, different versions of the same idea with different art styles or different. They start the universe over again almost every time, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, so Seth Rogen just did the Turtles. Like, it's anything could be brought back by anyone.
Yeah.
Like, if they wanted to buy the rights to whatever and do, the 2020s version of anything, it's probably more on the table now for creative people in Hollywood than it ever has been, I'm assuming. Like,
yep.
They don't want to make new properties. They want to do reboots of stuff that people already know.
Absolutely.
So, and I know that Turtles movie wasn't like a huge hit or anything, but they're making a sequel, so they must have sold enough action figures and stuff to make their money back and everything. But
yeah, it did good enough. And the last, I believe it was the third or fourth iteration of the show has ended. So they're restarting it up again using the movie version of his Turtles, which again are different.
Oh, well, there you go.
It's a different than the comic book material or the previous few shows. So again, slightly different take on things.
We'd have to look it up. I wonder how often. It must be every 5 years, 6 years they start a new one with the new art style. It might be a little bit longer than that, but I'm sure they've got it down to like a science at this point, where they're like, okay, the old one's phasing out. How do we bring them more than anybody? Maybe. I feel like they fell off hard, I feel like, in the middle of the 90s, but everything after that, they just came back and back. And I think they know the Turtles, man. They know how to do it even more than like DC or Marvel. I feel like as far as reinventing, they try, Superman's always relevant, Batman's always relevant, but some of these other guys, it's tough for them to reinvent. Like they made those Smurfs movies, and I think those did good, but it's like they've pulled everything out of the woodwork, and that was huge. Like, because that was a thing. It was like
found the right demographic, children, and
yeah. Was that a show? Because we had the toys, obviously, like in the 80s and 90s, and then I had like cassette tapes of Trolls, of them like singing songs and stuff, but I don't know if that was ever a cartoon show. It must have been something.
Yeah, it's definitely a show now. I don't remember being a show in the 80s or 90s, though, per se.
Right.
It definitely is now, though.
It's probably like a greeting card or something, like Strawberry Shortcake and some of those other characters were just on birthday cards before they ever got like movies and stuff.
Definitely. And some things were selling as whether it was toys or on cards and on stuffed animals and stuff before they were cartoons. and some are cartoons first or vice versa and that kind of thing. So
that's
kind of all over the place. Yeah, for sure.
So I thought you said 90s cartoons.
That works. So that's where I was at. So.
Okay. I wasn't doing every different property or every different avenue with it, but I did look at a list of every 90s show and come up with 5 that I would try to reboot.
Perfect. What is your number 5?
A number 5. Well, I don't really have them in order here. Let me think about this for a second.
Okay. You want me to give you my number 5?
Yeah, why don't you
start?
You go
okay.
First,
Okay.
And I'll get my list together here.
All right. It doesn't have to necessarily be in any certain order, but I tried to put them in order here of what I thought would be most exciting. Well, my number 5, I put Earthworm Jim.
Oh, nice, dude. Yes.
A little bit weird, I realize, and it did actually start as a video game before it had the TV show and then the toy line as well.
But a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah. So it was the video game first in 94, Earthworm Jim 2 in 95, and then Earthworm Jim 3D in 1999. That was cool when they did that. Yeah. It had failed movie attempts, failed comeback attempts. The cartoon ran for, I think, only 23 episodes from 95 to 96. And we did have a few action figures as well and lots of cool names for them, like Psychro.
He's showing me a Psychro action figure on the webcam.
Yeah,
folks.
I found one.
Right here. I mean, right here in the studio, everybody.
But yeah.
I had Peter Puppy.
Yep.
And he had the transformed version and then the tiny little version that he starts out as.
Yeah, those are really cool. So, of course, the old story there, pretty simple. It was just an earthworm wandering around the planet, and a special spacesuit landed, and he hopped into it. Yeah, and he could talk, and he could fight, and he's supposed to have a little bit of strength, I think, and durability, and now he carries weapons and can shoot guns, and he's like a savior, but he's also very naive and kind of dumb.
He uses his head as a whip.
Yep.
That's his other power.
Yep. And he saves Princess What's Her Name? That's literally what her name is.
I think it's Princess What's Her Name. Yeah. And then the queen is the queen evil pulsating slug for a butt.
That's what it is. Yep. So goofy names for the characters. It's supposed to be comedic. I almost feel like you could do, if you want, it could still be a kid show today, but it could also be like an Adult Swim type, aged up adult one, and he could almost be like a Deadpool type character. And he could be, he could up the violence a little bit, and he could just be this kind of dumb, naive, killer guy, always trying to save the princess, but he's got these other people always coming after him, trying to steal that super suit that fell off a spaceship, and that's how he ended up with it on Earth. But just a goofy cartoon, fun video games. We played the hell out of them.
They're very difficult to beat
and unique,
but they're very well designed.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's too bad they didn't last long, but you could do a whole new reboot video games show, probably aged a little older, but you could still have some of the collectibles and some of the affiliated apparel with that new line of t-shirts and things like that with Earthworm Jim. I think that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, dude, the thing about that, they had like such good animators when they made the game. It was so natural for them to make the show. It must have came out like almost at the same time, but I think you're right. It was a game first.
Yeah.
That would be funny. I know they did come out. They're doing like Earthworm Jim graphic novels, but it's like a Kickstarter thing. I feel like they've only done one, and they said there was going to be a bunch, and I don't know if those are ever going to happen.
Yeah, no.
But yeah, dude, there's totally room for, that would be amazing to have a new show of that.
I think so.
It's hysterical. It's got its own sense of humor.
Yeah. And just a nice reboot. And I think you could do a lot with it still, especially knowing how popular Deadpool has been. I think an aged up reboot would be a fun thing. Almost a cross between like a Rick and Morty and Deadpool type thing, maybe. That'd be fun, I think.
Isn't it weird that Deadpool is like a genre almost, and that there are a bunch of like goofy, psychotic heroes at this point?
Yeah.
Like, that wasn't a thing in the 90s. Deadpool was nowhere, and now it's like it's a Deadpool-like property, and
right.
That's a real thing.
Right, yeah.
What a wacky world. It went Spider-Man, and he's the first guy to like make fun of the villains while he's fighting them, and then they go to Venom, and he's just like insane.
Yep.
And then they go one step farther with Deadpool. That's how I always feel like the progression there, where adding like psycho comedy into superhero stuff. It's Spider-Man, Venom, Deadpool.
Yep, I agree.
But yeah, Earthworm Jim, put him in there. He's on the Deadpool end of the spectrum.
So who's first on your list?
Dude, I want him to bring back Tailspin, the show from the 90s.
Nice.
It was characters from the Jungle Book, but they were like recast as like pilots in, I don't even know what time period it was really supposed to be in. It felt like really weird and old-fashioned. And they was on when I was really little, so I don't remember a ton about it. But it was so funny and weird to me to see some of those same Jungle Book guys like recast in Tailspin. And I know it was part of that. It was a little before our time, but it was those Disney afternoon cartoons where you had like the Gummy Bears and the Chip and Dale.
Yep.
And it's just all about the adventure with like some comedy, but like the writing is so good. And it's just that sense of adventure with like a well-written Disney cartoon. And I feel like they could bring that back. They did that weird Chip and Dale thing that was not really the Rescue Rangers at all. It was more of like a Roger Rabbit knockoff type of thing.
Yeah.
But they could do like a slightly more violent Tailspin and tell some just good storytelling with cool characters. You remember Tailspin?
I do. 1990. Only one season officially. I'm not sure how many episodes here. I won an Emmy.
But it's like a 70 episode season.
That's what it was, yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's hard to break them down sometimes. Like 70 episodes, 4 seasons, or 70 episodes, 1 season. What do you consider for some of these animated shows? Yeah, right. I certainly do. I didn't. It's not one of the most prevalent memories I have, but I certainly remember it in some of the episodes. Yeah, I was looking at kind of that genre too of exploring and adventure, and yeah, I mean that's one of the early ones, like you said.
Yeah, for us, it was pretty early.
Yeah, so I absolutely agree. I believe they've got that's one of the shows that they've got back on Disney Plus now, and it'd be great to see a reboot of that. Absolutely. And that's one of those where they could age it up. They could keep that one as a kid show as well. I was thinking, it didn't make my list, but I was thinking like Cat Dog, for example, because I was looking through some Nickelodeon shows, see anything there. And Cat Dog is like a special thing where you have 2 attached characters, right? And you could do a lot with that. And would it be better aged up, or would it be better as a kid show? Because I think it still teaches some things like negotiation, sacrifice, a whole lot. Because you have 2 people combined, the cat and the dog, right? It's a unique take on that. Because you have a lot of buddy shows where they're always together and stuff like that. But these 2 animals are literally attached, right?
I feel like you get a lot more out of Cat Dog than I ever did. That was always like I would watch it just because it was on type of show. But maybe you're right. Maybe if I went back to that.
I'm not sure they always emphasize those concepts, but certainly I think they were there and they could be emphasized more. Yeah. And so I think a reboot with that, I was like, man, this would still be good, I think, as a children's show today, and still a unique character to build on. And so this too, again, could certainly be aged up, but it could also still be a children's show as well, of adventure, of maybe showing how to, find yourself, of overcoming personal boundaries and stuff like that, and
they
relationships.
Could put them on more of an adventure. Maybe that was the problem, is all those episodes, they were like just chilling in their living room.
Maybe.
Putting them on an adventure, that would help.
Yeah.
I agree.
So that, either way, that could be great. And they could do a line of, I don't even know what they do for like, restaurant toys and stuff now. Or different things like that.
McDonald's toys are pretty much the same.
Are they still?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same idea. That hasn't really evolved.
Yes, they could Yes, they could do different support for it like that. But an aged up one,
good point.
Yeah, would be interesting as well, and be able to have a little bit more adult themes in it as well. So yeah, either way, I think that'd be very cool.
It was slightly more adult, not as adult as Rocko's Modern Life or Ren and Stimpy.
Right.
Those were like shows for adults on a kids channel.
Yeah, that I remember.
Cat Dog was not at that level of raunchiness, but it was more raunchy. It's raunchier than SpongeBob, which has never been canceled and has never, they were on like season 15 or something, technically a 90s show. And it's gotten spin-offs anyway. Like it's also has, I think, 2 different spin-offs now.
Really?
That are both getting, Camp Coral and The Patrick Show.
Wow.
And they're both on like season 3 or 4 or whatever at this point.
I didn't even realize that.
They don't stop. Which brings me to my next entry. Real Monsters should get a reboot. Ren and Stimpy has gotten one. Rugrats has gotten one. A bunch of these stuff from the same time period has gotten brought back. Sometimes, well, like I said, Ren and Stimpy was like, that was very strange demographically. Oh my gosh, he's showing me what was that?
They did a mail away, I think, for some mini like micro machine type cars.
Dude, it's all 3 of them.
Yep.
It's Ickis, Crumb, and Oblina. Mm-hmm. I don't even really remember much of what happens in that show. I remember we collected the toys. I think I had all of them. Yep. The toys were awesome. They were kind of like McDonald's toys. Honestly, they weren't that. They were like small like that, but they all had like a different feature, and they were awesome, dude.
Yeah.
That show, I remember watching that show at Grammy's house, like sitting on her bed watching Real Monsters and being like, this is really creepy and messed up, but like just the right amount for that age. I wonder how they kept it, aimed at the very specific demographic. I know that stuff like Goosebumps and stuff like that, they have like a whole list of stuff that they are allowed to do and stuff that they're not allowed to do, so that they keep it right in that like PG pocket without like crossing the line, where they can still, entertain. You don't want to like mess the kid up. You just want to give them something weird to think about and look at,
something
and
to tickle the mind.
So they could bring it back. Goosebumps did get brought back as a movie, just as an aside. That was I feel like that was unlikely to happen, and then it happened. That was so kind of wild. The show was weird. But yeah, Real Monsters, dude. I remember the way the animation looked. I remember they were all like in like an auditorium, or not an auditorium. Yeah, like a lecture hall.
Yes.
And the teacher guy would like torture them if they did stuff wrong. Yeah. He would like beat the heck out of them.
Grumble.
The Grumble.
That was his name, yeah, with the 4 legs. This is number 4 on my list.
Nice. Okay, so I wondered if we would snipe any of each other's.
Yep.
Well, why don't you give your pitch?
Yeah. So it was, they were in monster school, right? In that garbage dump there. That's what it was.
Learning how to scare people.
Yeah. And I was thinking, I wasn't sure if I should put this on my list or not, only because I was thinking, I'm like, isn't that what Monsters Inc. is? Monsters Inc. in 2001, and then Monster University in 2013. But even those are older now. I thought there were more Monster Inc. movies out, but there aren't. It's been over 10 years.
They might have had a show.
Oh, maybe you're right. On Disney Plus.
Might be. But either way, you're right, though. That's an interesting connection to make.
Yeah. But so the Real Monsters show ran from 94 to 97. 52 episodes over 4 seasons. Not, the math on that doesn't really matter. But, so they were in like a garbage dump there, as you remember. And they were being taught to be scary monsters. So he had the little purple rabbit guy, of course. He could, like, his eyes got bloodshot red and he turned into a really big, scary monster. Like he grew or whatever.
Yeah. They all had like their scare form. Yeah. Where they would like transform into a little bit scarier. He was, Ickis. He was kind of like a rabbit. You're right.
Yeah. And then, was it Crumb was just had held his eyeballs in his hands because he didn't actually have a head. He was just like a walking head, basically. He didn't wear any clothes. He just like a mouth with 2 legs, basically.
He was like eyes. A mouth with arms and legs, and he held his. And then when he had to use his hands, he put his eyeballs in his mouth. Yeah. That was my favorite guy. I thought Crumb was hysterical. I had the toy of Crumb, and he had the eyeballs in his hands, and when you squeezed him, he shot them out of his
Yep.
hands. Pretty sure.
Yep.
And then you could pull them out of his hands and put them in his mouth.
Yep. And then Oblina there, she looks like kind of like a centipede. Did she just kind of like elongate or something or scare? She did something like that.
She got like more Medusa head. She would like flick her tongue and get.
Yeah, that's what it was.
She'd like puff up.
That's what it was. Yeah. But yeah, it was a good show. And again, some of those shows were darker, right? So it was like Real Monsters, Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
there's some very messed up stuff in Courage.
Yeah, there is. That was like a creepy show.
Not on my list, just because I feel like they did it to death already. There's quite a few seasons of that, and I feel like they did every possible concept. It's just those three characters. It's like you can't, there's only so much you can do with Courage.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, Real Monsters, I think that could be like an aged up thing as well. And you could get into some more mature shenanigans with those folks and some creepier stuff, but still keep the funny, edgy side of it. I think that would be a good time.
Yeah, I wonder if that would work in the modern age. It was such a aligned with that whole like 90s gross out aesthetic. It was in like commercials. It was all about like boogers and puke and how funny that was. And
that's true.
Real Monsters was very like, dumping slime on people, all that kind of stuff was very 1990s.
That's true. That's very true.
Fit right in with that.
Yeah. I don't know if you could run the dark edge, and the Batman animated series and that being like a darker tone, not just in color palette, but sometimes in content. He's dealing with crazy people. So Batman, the cartoons have pretty much always been a darker palette. That really set the tone as well for the 90s cartoons too.
Yeah. Yeah, that just set the standard. I feel like that was the real first, kids show that was that people like took seriously as far as the storytelling and the lighting, the cinematography, like everything about that show, like how they draw it, how they write it, the music. It was all so sophisticated. And it was, a kid could watch it. It was just good storytelling. Like it wasn't a kid show. It wasn't an adult show. It was just a great show.
Yeah.
X-Men was like that, obviously.
Yep, X-Men and Spider-Man as well. Some of the other Marvel properties did not follow that, because the Iron Man, Fantastic Four, Hulk all had series around the same time, but they were not quite.
And they all cross over.
Yeah.
But I would go back to Spider-Man and watch that again, probably as an adult, and enjoy it.
Yeah, it's still a good show. Absolutely.
The progression, like the characters keep moving forward, they don't just do the same thing every episode.
Yeah, and you didn't wrap it up in 22 minutes. You had like, you throw on the cartoon and be like, I think that's part of how I learned Roman numerals. It'd be like Sins of the Father, part X11X. I'd be like, what in the hell? We're still on this storyline? Like, what episode is this? What part is this? Yeah.
Dude, and those must play like movies. There must be a cut of it where it's just like divided into films instead. Because you're right, some of those, like, what's the difference between a 9-part episode and a movie?
Yeah.
They just cut a couple theme songs and recaps out, and just, I wonder if you can watch it that way.
Probably. There's just like entire seasons that are one storyline, which is fine, but it's just like part 1, part 2. It's just like season 4, episode 1, episode 2. It's just like the whole season is one story. So they just part it out that way. It's kind of fun. My next one, you're probably not as familiar with it. It's not one that I've circled a lot, but it's been around. It's Judge Dredd.
Oh, yeah.
The official read off here from Wikipedia: a law enforcement and judicial officer in the dystopian future city of Mega City 1, which covers the entire East Coast of America. He's a street judge empowered to arrest, convict, sentence, and execute criminals. And his gun is called the Lawgiver. Now, he had comics dating back to the late or mid 70s. He had a regular Judge Dredd magazine, I believe it was called. He has various novels, toys, 1995 movie with Sylvester Stallone, and then
Hey, he's got a Judge Dredd.
Yeah, I got him.
Dude, I should have brought some merch. You got a grip of '90s nostalgia
I got
right
a few.
there.
I got a few things here. And then 2012, they did a movie reboot as well. I haven't seen anything at all done on him since 2020, and really previous to that, it was 10 years of some mini comics here and there, like a 4-issue miniseries here, 4-issue there, whatever here and there throughout the 2010s. But basically, and this may be covered in some of the novels, and some of the stuff is retconned and retold throughout the different mediums. But something happens. We're in the future. 2099, I believe, is the year, because remember, it originally started in the 70s. Not that it matters now. It is still the future, but it's closer future now, right? And
Right.
yeah, basically, the world is a little bit more self-contained, but shut off, and they basically combined, judge, jury, executioner, police all into one. There's multiple judges, because some of them go bad, and that's in at least one of the movies. But Judge Dredd, because there's like Judge Al and Judge Jeffrey and but Judge Dredd specifically is what all the stories mostly follows the main character. And it's just...
And does he arrest people, or does he just shoot people in the skull?
He shoots people, or he'll arrest them, but basically they work with like a main database, like a call center. And they're like, yeah, go kill this person. They're guilty. Or go, so it's immediately like decided on the spot. So he has the ability to do that. So, again, future dystopian. We have a lot of stuff, Dune's coming up, and what's the other? Oh gosh, it's eluding me. The other movie that just had a new part come up, but we have some of that dystopian future stuff being rebooted. It's similar to that.
Mad Max.
Mad Max. That's what I was thinking. Obviously, there is some police brutality stuff associated with that, which is obviously a very serious and sensitive issue right now. Always has been, but there's some interesting stories that can be made to that, both in a sci-fi way, maybe some lessons that could be taught to connect to a real world way as well. But just an interesting property that's been around for almost 50 years. And I think could use an interesting reboot. Wow. Whether they go back to movies, I hate to go back. It seems like it's so soon to go back to movies after even 12 years. But whether they went back to film, it's clearly an adult property, film, or maybe a mature like Netflix show or something like that. I think Judge Dredd would be an interesting reboot to see. Ben, I lost you. You're on mute.
I know, that was the cough break.
Oh, okay.
I was taking a coughing break. One more. That was a sneeze break. Okay. Yeah, Judge Dredd, they had a couple movies, right?
Yes.
But they weren't like connected, I feel like.
No.
They're just each standalone.
Each standalone. And they could follow different judges if they want, just like different characters, but they pretty much all follow this Judge Dredd. Maybe the novels switch it up, but they pretty much all follow one guy who's kind of gruff, but also seems to be have a moral compass.
Okay, so he's kind of a good guy. Yeah, that was a cartoon too. They did have that as a 90s show at the time of Batman and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure.
Did they? I was thinking of, I was getting it mixed up with RoboCop initially, and perhaps you could you could have a whole futuristic universe.
You could fight RoboCop.
Yeah. Yep. What is next on your list?
Next on my list is actually a movie. And it is, I want to see The Pagemaster 2. Have you seen The Pagemaster 1?
Yes.
Where he's the kid from Home Alone, goes to the library, and then he gets sucked into the library, and there's a wizard. It like mixed live action and cartoons. It was mostly a cartoon, though. Like the beginning and the end, he was like a live action kid, and then he gets... It's kind of like Wizard of Oz or, Alice in Wonderland or whatever, where he gets sucked into a world. And it's every character from all the classic novels. And that it actually sounds stupider the more I talk about it, but he has talking books, and all the talking books are like different genres, and they have different personalities. So he meets, I think it's adventure, fantasy, and horror.
Yeah.
Are the three talking books that help him. The animation was terrible. If you go back and look at that, like, I think it's very obvious, even to people who don't know a lot about cartoons, that it's much inferior to like Disney or anything else that was out at the time. But so maybe they should just remake the first one with better art, bring in a different kid, and then do a little more modern. Or do something, totally stupid like have a bunch of talking iPads. I don't know.
Well, 30 years old this year, 1994.
Hey, all right.
I love this movie because we didn't own it in my household, so we had to rent it a few times. And I'm like, this is so cool. I like the mystery. I like the the fantasy stuff we had going on. Had elements that I liked. Books, reading, little creepy. We had the pirate book, which must have been adventure.
Yeah.
The fairy book.
Fairy book and the like Frankenstein book.
This could be a children's series where he goes to the library and rents books and goes to a different adventure every time or something like that. I could see that. I could see a Disney Plus show on the cartoon on this. That would be great. I love that. Or a movie reboot, like you said. One of the
Hey, if they get a Space Jam 2 and some of this other crap, I mean, Pagemaster 2 is on the table. Somebody has said that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I don't think it did it didn't do. If it had done well, they would have made a lot more toys of it. I don't think it did amazing. It had a really good like Super Nintendo game and stuff. But yeah, I don't even remember any merch. I'm sure it had like McDonald's toys or something.
Yeah.
At one point or another.
Yeah, I believe it.
Oh yeah, Disney owns it. It's owned by Fox, so Disney has this. They can do this.
Yeah, that'd be sweet. Yeah, I don't know if did they have the rights originally? Maybe they did. But yeah.
It was with Fox originally, and now Disney owns all of the Fox stuff.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, that was cool. The part with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was terrifying.
I remember that. Yeah, that being spooky and scary.
They can go back to that well. It's like what's the good one? A League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Yeah.
It's not that different. It's all the different literary characters teaming up to do something to make you want to read.
Basically all your folklore type characters. Invisible Man, Merman, or whatever. Yeah. That was good too. That was based on the graphic novel. Then they did the movie.
For sure.
Which didn't rank well, but I remember it fondly. And Sean O'Connery was the main. Yeah, with our grandma. Absolutely.
You remember me, you, and them all saw it in theaters.
Yep. And the bros, yeah. Yep. Sean O'Connery, the lead in that. Absolutely. Yeah, that was good.
Oh, yeah.
How'd you pick that? Where'd you get that from?
I realized it was similar to Pagemaster.
Yeah. Okay.
So Pagemaster 2, let's get it.
All right.
Space Jam 2, Pagemaster 2. It's easy.
Sounds good to me.
Just crank it out. Crank them out. Who cares?
All right. I have Captain Planet.
Oh, no. Okay,
do you have it?
Okay. No, I don't. Okay. I just go for it. Let's hear some Captain Planet.
6 seasons from 90 to 96. I guess I didn't jot down how many episodes, but a few. The 5 characters were actually based on like real environmentalists at the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, or at least elements of a few. I guess one of them was based on a couple different folks, but it was taught to at least teach kids about basic environmental issues. I know that's become more controversial now, whether it's because it's politically charged or because there's differing opinions on how quickly the environment's deteriorating or exactly how or different things like that. But at least a few things we can agree on, like I learned to cut up my plastics and stuff from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, right?
Yeah.
So there's at least a few things that can be agreed on, or oil spills are bad, that's
oil spills bad.
Yeah. So there's certain elements that can be put into Captain Planet. And if you want to put other debatable things in there, you could do that too, or, whatever. Save the planet, right? Plot was really pretty simple. It's like the spirit of Earth or something, which was portrayed as a female woman in this, which oversaw Earth, handed 5 rings of power out to 5 different people across the planet. Somehow they all got together every episode, right, for a crisis. And then they used the earth, wind, fire, water. Earth, wind, fire, water. What do I miss?
Heart. Which is not a thing.
Whatever that
Maybe
is.
it is. No, it is. Your spirit.
There we go.
The spirit. Yeah. So, but there was a girl. I don't think I ever saw that. I feel like that was on at like 6 a.m.
It was on. So for a while, it was on that USA Cartoon Express, and it was on with Turtles for a while, and like Street Fighter, and the Itsy Bitsy Spider cartoon.
Don't remember that.
There's a show, the Itsy Bitsy Spider cartoon. And I think the intro music was like it got washed down the water spout. And to my recollection, it was literally like a grade school girl that talked to a talking spider, if I remember correctly.
Was it like a Nick Jr. show for babies, or was it like a show?
It was just one of those 7+ age shows, I think.
Yeah,
Saturday
like
morning.
Garfield.
Yeah. That, because
Garfield demographic.
Yeah. So yeah.
I don't remember the spider. That's funny.
Yeah. So it was on a weird lineup, that Cartoon USA, and I think it must have been the USA Network, which doesn't do any of that stuff anymore, to my knowledge. But yeah, Tom Cruise voiced Captain Planet the first 6 episodes.
Dude,
did you know that?
No.
There you go.
I don't even believe you.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. So, I mean, is this like the live action Tom Cruise version, or where are you going with this?
No, I'm just saying. That's just a little fun factoid for you. For the first 6 episodes, before they switched to a regular voice actor, he voiced Captain Planet.
They ran out of dough. They had him for like the first pilot run or whatever.
As he was,
that's funny.
Getting popping there. Toys. There were some toys, of course. They never got a movie off the ground. 12-issue comic series, but that was it, I guess.
Oh,
one
really?
crappy,
that's a lot.
Yeah, one crappy video game, never really got anywhere. So outside the TV show, there really wasn't a whole lot going on for Captain Planet. And if you want to make a more conscientious show while still having a cool guy at the center and have lessons of teamwork and togetherness and some education and some cool villains. They had some weird names on there too. They were kind of fun. I think that Captain Planet would be a fun show to reboot if we could avoid, any controversy. Similar to Judge Dredd, I don't like, some of those topics are difficult now, so I don't know if it's necessarily that would keep it from being rebooted at this moment. Or
that's why they should do it, though, right?
I think so.
Get people talking, get some controversial something going. That'd be cool.
So some of these villains, Verminous,
I don't remember any of them.
Yeah, Verminous Scum, Doug Nukem, which I believe there was.
Yeah, you can't say Verminous Scum anymore.
Yeah, there was.
That didn't age.
There was a
Duke Nukem. What did you say?
Yeah, Duke Nukem was in there, and they like changed the spelling or something so that the other Duke Nukem, they didn't have a copyright issue. Hoggish Greed. There's a dude named Hoggish Greed in it, which reflects greed. There's Sly Sludge. There's Dr. Blight. And if they put some of the villain rings there's some villain rings that they can put together to create Captain Pollution.
Oh, there's the team.
Yeah. And he's evil, and he has like the broken planet symbol on his chest.
Oh, he's like Bizarro Captain Planet.
Yeah, and he's like yellow and red. So still would have to be a children's show. I just can't see how you make that a more serious thing. I can't see it.
Yeah.
But I think it'd be an interesting property to reboot for children.
It was like Power Rangers, right? There was just like 5 or 6 guys, and they each had a color, and it was like Superman leading the Power Rangers and killing pollution. They should combine it with the Toxic Crusaders.
There we go.
And why? That's 2 totally different things, but they're both. I feel like Toxic Crusaders is a little bit older. The toys of that are back, by the way.
And they're awesome.
They're
brightly colored. They're beautiful. Is that on your list, or should we sidebar on that for a second?
It's not on my list. Do you have a sidebar on Crusaders?
Just that I remember. So I recently. So the movies came out first. Movie came out first.
Yeah, which is like an adult movie spoof of horror movies.
Yeah, an adult spoof movie of this poor guy that gets bullied and falls in sludge, and you feel sorry for him. And then he comes out this oozy monster, and like
Yes.
kills some normal people before saving the day.
Have you seen it? I saw it one time a long time ago.
I saw it recently. It's been it was free on
Nice.
Tubi, I think, right now. You've been Tubiing a lot of older stuff because
Very cool.
Tubi's been loading up on properties recently. He made at least a second one I haven't seen, or a third one. He gets married at the end of the first, I think. Really weird. Just weird stuff, right? Almost like Grindhouse, but it's not all blood and well, there is blood. I don't know what it is. It's a very strange show.
Yeah, that's not too far off. You're right.
Yeah, and so they made it into a children's TV show. So they made it from like 18 plus
Yes.
to like age 7 cartoon all of a sudden.
It's like if they had gone from like Jaws and then made like a kid's
Finding
show or
Nemo?
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I remember watching a few of the cartoon. I don't think it lasted more than a season. The figures were cool and colorful. I remember having some of the coloring books and that kind of thing. I remember that it was kind of fun. And it was toned down. There were clearly some villains that were different from like the first movie. I'm sure the second movie where he was fighting humans. Like he was fighting like a 4-armed supervillain in the cartoon, which was kind of.
The show was like Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
The movie series is like Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
Yeah, exactly.
Which also got a cartoon.
Yes. That ironically, yes.
That's the analogy. We got
there
it.
We go.
That's the most similar.
Exactly.
That was another adult spoof movie that got turned into
exactly.
cartoon.
Yep.
That's a weird time.
That is a very weird time. So yeah, Toxic Crusaders though, if they did more Toxic Crusaders, again, would it be movies? Would it be shows? Would it be the demographic? I don't know. Characters are fun and colorful, but I don't know what the demographic would be or what content you'd want exactly. I think you could do an adult thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think they could just spoof the heck out of it. They could just do like a really raunchy, like Adult Swim show where they just kill the characters in every episode. They could do anything with that. And I feel like the same way about Captain Planet, honestly. I think they could do like the actual, like stay in that style, or they could do a Captain Planet show that was just a total spoof of Captain Planet. Like, those Space Ghost shows where they brought him back and it was just, they just made fun of it the whole time.
I agree. I mean, I could definitely see that. I just think it fits nicely into, that child audience. I just think it works really well. And that'd be my first choice, I think, as a reboot.
Yeah, there's a spot for it.
What you got next on deck?
I think they should bring back Recess and just age everybody up. Just like keep following those same people and do some more, like do more grades of those same characters.
I thought you were going to make them adults, call it Coffee Break or something.
Oh, yeah. I mean, whatever. You could do, it could be different each season. They could age more. It could just be more Recess. I guess Coffee. Yeah, you got it. No, you're
I didn't mean to take your, that's just what popped into my head.
Yeah, no, you got it. So they're like interns or they're like, I don't know. No, it'd be funny. They could do, what grade are they supposed to be in? Like 3rd grade, 4th grade? I feel like you got TJ is the cool kid. Spinelli is the cool girl. Gretchen is the nerdy girl. Mikey is kind of like he's like the goofball, like loner kind of guy. I can't remember what the basketball dude's name is.
Yeah, so they start out in 4th grade. Vince, yeah, you got it.
And they got Gus, who's like the other nerdy boy. And it's like it shows that you can be like a bunch of dudes, and it's like they have one of everything in there. It's not like they're all nerds or they're all jocks or they're all whatever. It's like all the different kids, they're just all friends with whoever. And that show was like The Simpsons for kids, I feel like, with all the different side characters and running gags and side plots and how every side character ended up meeting every other side character and having, interactions and relationships. That was a really good, well-written. It was funny. The plots were like amped up kid scenarios. It would be like normal stuff that kids went through, but it was slightly more like amped up. Not quite. They didn't like have dream sequences or anything, but it was like they just had their own kid culture and universe and rules and how they kept the peace on the playground between all the different factions of kids.
Almost.
So what? They're in fourth, and then I think there's like a movie where they graduate to fifth, and that's the end. I'm pretty sure that's how it goes.
Gotcha. Yeah. So created their own kind of atmosphere there, and
Yeah,
it was almost like a sitcom for kids in cartoon form, I guess. Yeah. Ran from 97 to 2001. See, that's like 5 years, and it's accredited for 10 seasons.
It's not 2 per year. Yeah, that doesn't make sense. They could do them in middle school. They could do it in high school. They could do it in like college, like any age with those characters. I think they did do one more movie where they're like in kindergarten. So it's like a prequel.
Yeah, 4 movies. It's all together.
I've not seen all that. So it works in different age. That's like the Rugrats version. Rugrats did that thing where they made them teenagers. They did All Grown Up, the show, which I thought was cool. I was the right age for them to switch it up, and still follow. Because it got to the point where Rugrats had more of an ongoing thing as well with the side characters and everything. And they switched it up. So
I agree. I like that pick. All right. Do you have a number one, or you want to hear my number?
Go for your number one.
All right. So I think I've, at least in passing, mentioned this, but I have The Mask at number one.
Oh, nice, dude. Very cool.
Yeah. So it started out in 1991 as a comic, and it was a series of miniseries. It was like 4 issues, then another 4-issue follow-up, then another 4-issue follow-up.
Yeah.
The comics have run, again, a bunch of miniseries, and it was basically through, I think 2015 was the last time he appeared in a comic, or there was like a baby mask in something. But series comics have basically run through, I think, the mid-2000s in some kind of continuity. 1994, Jim Carrey and Cameron Diaz were in the Mask movie. And the second one, I thought there was another one in between here, but 2005 was another one. So they waited over 10 years for the Son of the Mask. Different cast. It bombed. I've never even seen it. Yeah.
I've seen them both.
And then the animated series ran from 95 to 97, 3 seasons, 54 episodes, and there was a video game for the Super Nintendo as well. It was handled a little bit differently in different iterations. So the first movie, the entire cartoon, and the first section of the comic handled Stanley Itkiss, who either purchased or found this mask that when he puts it up to his face, it attaches itself to him. And he basically, from his perspective, is kind of like this dream sequence. And he's kind of influenced by the mask that kind of has a personality of its own, but melds to his wants and desires. So throughout the different iterations, it's kind of, the abilities of the mask kind of changes a little bit, but it seems to have a little bit mind of its own. It just kind of melds with the id, I guess, of the person it's attached to. So it's usually very violent and destructive. It's almost always violent and destructive. It's always violent and destructive. It also can, all of a sudden you're invulnerable. You can pull stuff out of anywhere, cars, guns, hammer.
It's like he turns into like Wile E. Coyote. He can like
changes
pull
form.
Anything out of anywhere. Yeah,
you're like,
he can transform.
Some kind of superhuman thing. And there's a couple different slight variations on where the mask came from, whether it's Loki, the god of mischief that created it, or it's some kind of, basically it somehow stems from him in one way or another. It's created by folks in Africa and it came to America somehow, and it's got Loki's power, something like that. That's some of the prime background of it. But it's kind of left up in the air, and it's kind of been changed, whether it's through, I believe the original was told in the second movie, the comics, and like the show. So it's changed a few times. But Stanley Itkiss dies in the comics. He's a killer right away, and then he dies in the first 4-issue miniseries. Whereas he's the main focus of the first movie and like the entire cartoon series.
Yes.
And other folks pick up the mask, including a detective for a prolonged period who tries to do good things with the mask for the next couple miniseries in the comics throughout the 90s, and then other folks later on. So different folks can have it. It has different powers, and the comics were very violent. And
Yeah.
it could be another weird, goofy property you could do a whole lot of anything with. You could almost kind of fabricate your own origin story to it. You could pull different characters in. It seems like you could go a lot of different directions with a mask that can do anything.
Yeah, he's not like a good guy.
No, not generally.
He's more evil than Deadpool. He just does stuff.
Yep, pretty much.
Like chaotic stuff.
Yes.
It's like he turns into like a Looney Tune. It's like the way that the Looney Tunes mess with each other, where they do stuff that is gonna like kill someone.
Yeah.
But it's just cartoon physics. And he's like, oh, I'm gonna swallow a stick of dynamite. Isn't that great?
Yeah,
that would play. I think they should do it live action, and I think they should do it as like a Netflix series where different people take the mask and do stupid stuff with it.
I would love that. That'd be awesome.
Like each episode is a different guy that dies at the end.
I love it. Very, we keep saying, well, let's make it more violent. Well, this is something that it could be more violent. Other than Judge Dredd, it could be more violent than any of the other ones. So that could really be something. So I like that. Especially the Amazon series, The Boys, the adaptation of that, and Invincible have been very bloody.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
They did Invincible, didn't they?
Yep.
Yeah.
They just finished season 3 of that, I think. And they've been very true to the comics, which are very violent. And those are two properties that could actually benefit from that in the storytelling, I think. So what would you like to see rebooted, Mr. Benjamin?
Well, let me do a couple quick asides here.
Okay, let's hit them.
Did you know that they rebooted Tiny Toons?
No.
They did. Did you know that they rebooted Animaniacs?
No.
So we got to watch those because those are hysterical. Those original shows were like the funniest things ever. Those hold up. If you go watch Animaniacs as an adult, you'll laugh your ass off.
Okay.
That's like a whole different style of comedy. They just played that for kids, but they wrote it for the parents.
I'll have to check that out. I haven't checked on those in a while. Pinky and the Brain could have had their own spin-off.
Yep. And then there was Freakazoid was also by that same studio. You remember Freakazoid?
Freakazoid? No, I might have to look that one up. I don't remember Freakazoid.
It was honestly kind of like The Mask. He was like a crazy superhero.
Oh, yeah.
He like was mentally challenged.
Yes, I do remember
He would like try to help and try to save the day and like run around and punch stuff.
Was he closer?
That could get a reboot.
Yeah. Was this closer to The Mask or the Joker?
He was a good guy, but it was like comedy. Like he would like try to help and like ruin stuff and like not understand, what was actually happening and like save the wrong people. It was like a Looney Tunes version of a superhero.
All right. Sounds almost like the Tick.
That would be another one. Yeah. In that same style.
Okay.
That got a few different iterations. There's a live action Tick and a cartoon Tick.
Yep.
Speaking of that type of a thing where there's live action and cartoon, they should bring back Men in Black. That's my pick. I want a Netflix show that's a cartoon because I don't think they would have the budget. Or maybe they would. I don't care if it's a cartoon or live action. But it should be like an ongoing Men in Black story where it's like an intense, interwoven detective thing. They could have any letter of the alphabet, agent A, B, C, D, E, F, G, do whatever they wanted, cast, men, women, anybody, and have just a really cool cast, like ensemble cast of aliens, humans, all the different agents, mix it all together, but, tell like an adult ongoing story with it where it's like interwoven drama that, goes up, every episode contributes to some ongoing threat or whatever that they're dealing with. It could be political. It could be anything. Like there's so many like hilarious metaphors and jokes they can do with the aliens and the different situations. That show, the cartoon was smart. It was well written. It was funny. It's like the stuff that happened. It was like a buddy cop show with like really dry humor, but then it also worked as like a sci-fi, almost horror thing most of the time. It was like a messed up sci-fi action comedy, and they nailed it with that cartoon show. That original 90s, 97, I think, Men in Black cartoon
Yeah.
is like perfect. It's similar to some of those Ghostbusters cartoons, possibly, is like the most similar thing I can think
Same
of.
type of art style.
But I want a Netflix series of that. They could do episodic where they're killing a different alien each episode, but then it also like leads up to some big boss or whatever at the end of the season instead of resetting it in every episode. What do you think about Men in Black? Yeah, that would be a hit, dude.
Ran for 97, like you said, to 2000, 2001. Ran for 53 episodes. It was great. That could be something where you do like a Ghostbusters crossover too.
Sure.
Or Scooby-Doo crossover. That'd be fun. No, yeah. Scooby-Doo did crossovers with everyone. So did like Batman and the Turtles, but that'd be fantastic. Men in Black, 97, Men in Black 2, 2002, Men in Black 3, 10 years later, 2012, Men in Black International, 2019. I don't think that did as well. Yes, we need
it's time.
Real Men in Black, a real show. You can have a revolving cast if you want. You can bring in special guest spots that allows for that if you want. So I've been thinking about this. So, you know, Batman had, as you know, as a DC expert, 50,000 comic lines, especially in the 90s. But the Batman detective line specifically was meant to be like a more investigative.
Yeah, for sure. Detective comics.
So you could do a more investigative Men in Black. You still have your aliens and all that, but you could still write it from the perspective of a crime and a mystery focused with that and have the aliens mixed in as well. I would like to see something like that. Because I always try to think of, if you're rebooting a show, how can you also do it from a different perspective? And one of the things I always think of is those Batman comics and how Batman had like 5. And some of them, you know, one of them was more attributed to the cartoon. One of them would be like Batman and Robin, obviously focused on their adventures. But Batman Detective Comics specifically, it wasn't necessarily supposed to be less action or less whatever, but it was supposed to be more focused on Batman stories using his detective skills. Just a different kind of story perspective, story writing, story reading for the Batman when you read this kind of monthly issue. So I often think, well, if we're rebooting something, how can we do it from a different perspective with kind of that kind of thing in mind? So you could do that with the MIB as well, writing from more of a detective mystery series as well. Just happens to be aliens too. So I think that's awesome. I like that.
True.
That was something that was I pondered as well. So I very much like that it made your.
I would love it, dude.
Yeah. So I mean, I considered a lot of other stuff. You know, I considered all the different, you know, the Street Sharks and the. I was like, does Battletoads need a TV show? I don't know. Battletoads.
They're really doing biker mice?
Yeah.
Or are you messing with me though?
That's one of the reports out there, but whether it actually comes through and
I feel like if they can't make a good live action Turtles, then how are they going to do biker mice?
I don't know. I think
they should try
it supposed to be
there's hope for everything that we said on this list if they're actually going to do biker mice.
Yeah.
That's weirder than a lot of what we said.
I concur with that. You know, like would it be cool to have a new Street Sharks? I don't.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Or is it played out?
Yeah, I don't. You know, I don't know. You had four teens who were kidnapped and injected with, you know, DNA of sharks and other shark people.
Yeah,
that's fine. You can work with that, but you know, turtles are 4 guys fell into ooze and they're now turtles, and you know, so it is kind of played out. You just need to take a new spin on it or create cool new villains or like, I don't know, really good writing or relationship build
or really bad writing and do it as like a live action thing where they just punch each other through walls for 90 minutes. That's not your number one though.
So I had Mask at number 1, Captain Planet at number 2, Judge Dredd at 3, Real Monsters at 4, and number 5 for me was
nice.
And you had Men in Black, Recess. What was your number 3?
I don't remember. Oh, Page Master.
There we go.
You got my 5.
Yep, Men in Black, Recess, Page Master. Real Monsters, and Tailspin. Yeah.
Got
Through
him.
a ton of different stuff like Mummies Alive and Ultra Force and Wildcats. And then I was like,
Wildcats is good.
yeah. And then I was like, I was looking at Inspector Gadget, and he had a show like 5 years ago. I was like, we could do more Inspector Gadget. What if we did like a more aged up Inspector Gadget? And like his niece Penny was, I don't know, in college now and
Yeah,
always
like the
giving him a
dog,
hard
maybe.
time. Yeah. And he has the dog now because she's in college or something. And he's a more gritty detective. And maybe we see
Dr.
Dr.
Claw.
Clum, do some more stuff. Then I'm like, what about Carmen Sandiego? Can we loop her in there? I'm like,
That was my honorable mention that I forgot to honorably
was
mention.
it Carmen Sandiego?
Number 6 is Carmen Sandiego. I'm not going to pitch it. I'm just going to mention it honorably.
Gotcha. Yeah. All right. Well, this was good. This was fun.
Yeah, dude.
We'll have to do another retro
Another
reboot. I don't remember the 4 R's now. Retro
Revival
reboot
remix.
revival remix soon. But
Yeah, congrats on 100 episodes of the Michael Welch podcast. That's a monumental achievement.
Thank you, sir.
Branching it out, doing the 5-hour special 100th episode for y'all. I like it.
Thank you, sir.
It's going to be groovacious.
All right. Check out
I would love to come back again sometime.
You will be back. Make sure to check out the Pennymen podcast if you like what we discussed today. And we'll be working on season 3 of Polymuse coming up sometime soon here. So that'll be, we'll announce when that's coming out.
Love you all. God bless you. Keep tuning in. See you soon.
Thanks to Charlie and thanks to Ben. I did originally have Elliot scheduled for another segment, but he fell ill. I'll have him on in the next couple weeks to talk college football. Thank you, Big Sherm, for the use of his music on my intros and outros here. Thank you for listening to the Michael Welch podcast. Here's to another 100. Please 5-star review. Please thumbs up. Please subscribe. Spotify, Amazon, now on YouTube podcasts and other nooks and crannies. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
All my blessings, 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 all my blessings.
I need my blessings every penny. Daily counting every single one, I'm seeing plenty. Level up and watch that beater turn into a Bentley. See, I'm stunning, so I'm all I'm thinking, please don't tell me.